I'm John Gautner, and today I want to talk about the basics of sake. This is the least you need to know to go out and enjoy sake as soon as possible. I'll actually be dividing this up into 3 different videos, and this is the first of those. And at the end, I'll add a little bit of extra stuff beyond the basics to help you to continue to enjoy sake as you move forward. And the very first question that we have to answer is, what is it? What is the stuff that we call sake? And in short, sake is an alcoholic beverage that's brewed, and it's brewed from rice and rice alone. There's 2 aspects of this that I want to cover right now. The first of those is that sake is actually a brewed product. And when I say it's a brewed product, it's actually closer to a beer than it is to anything else. Sometimes we hear sake referred to as a rice wine, and actually technically it's not a wine. It's made completely differently. Sometimes people think that sake is a spirit, but sake is not a distilled beverage either. As I pointed out, it's actually closer to a beer than it is to anything else. Both sake and beer are made from grains, and there's no sugar in grains. There's only starch. And you need to chop the starch into sugar first before you can ferment and get carbon dioxide. So actually, sake is a brewed beverage closer to a beer than any other beverage, but it is unique in how it's produced. The other thing is that sake is made from rice and rice alone. No other fermentable materials are used in the production of sake. Rice is the only fermentable material. Very often, beer will use other grains and other adjuncts in order to end up with the final product. But with sake, the only fermentable material used is rice. So sake is an alcoholic beverage that's brewed, and it's brewed from rice and rice alone. The alcohol content is about 16%. Sometimes sake can have alcohol as high as 20%. The alcohol can naturally occur to about 20%. But they almost always water that down to just about 16%, could be 15, could be 17, simply because the flavors and aromas are much more enjoyable at that slightly less impactful alcohol level. Next, the history of sake. There's a long answer and a short answer to everything related to sake. And the short answer of how long has sake been around the planet is about 1,000 years. The reason I like to say that is because there's many steps in the sake brewing process, but they've all been in use for about 1,000 years, give or take a century or so in either direction. So for all intents and purposes, sake has been on the planet for about 1,000 years. However, if you go back about 1,700 years, archaeological finds have shown that someone left some bowls of rice laying around, and some naturally occurring koji mold fell into that, which gives us enzymes to chop starch into sugar, and then some naturally occurring yeast cells fell into that. And about a week or 2 later, they had a bubbly mash that made people smile and giggle when they drank it. And they very slowly tried to reproduce that, getting more and more refined products and higher alcohol content over the years. So in some way, shape, or form, they've been making an alcoholic beverage from rice in Japan for about 1,700 years. A further complication to the history question is ginjo sake. Ginjo sake is super premium sake. It's basically the top 15% of the market. Ginjo is much more refined, much more elegant. Ginjo gets all the attention and all the spotlight. However, it's only been on the market as a viable product for about 50 years. So as much attention and glory as ginjo gets, it's a relative newcomer to the sake world. So the short answer, sake has been around for about 1,000 years. Next, I want to talk about good sake and better sake. You'll notice that I didn't say good sake and bad sake. Pretty much technology has gotten to the point where there's almost no bad sake out there. So everything's decent, drinkable, and some of it is much better than that. So I want to talk about is what are the things that affect the quality of sake? What makes one sake some of the best ambrosia that you've ever enjoyed, and other sake just mundane and bland at best? The way I like to explain it is there's 3 things. There's 3 things that make one sake better and more expensive than another. However, before I talk about what makes one sake better than another, there's something else about sake that I want to touch on. And to me, this is one of the most user-friendly things about sake. It's just wonderful. And that's this. 90% of the time, sake is fairly priced. Certainly not everybody will agree with that. And certainly there's a lot of exceptions out there. However, 90% of the time, sake is fairly priced. Now what's great about this is you don't have to be able to read labels. You don't have to know brands. You don't have to know the grades. All you need to do is walk into a store and make a decision based on price within your budget, and you're almost guaranteed to be happy with what you come out with. 90% of the time, sake is fairly priced. I think that's wonderful. Makes sake very, very approachable. So what I want to talk about now are the 3 things that make one sake better and more expensive than another. And the first of those 3 things that make one sake better and more expensive than another is the quality of the rice that you begin with. This shouldn't be surprising at all. Just like good wine is made from grapes that are significantly different from the grapes that we buy at the grocery store, good sake is made from rice that's significantly different from the rice that we eat in bowls and under sushi and things like that. There are a lot of differences between sake rice and regular table rice. Sake rice is larger, the grains are larger, the stalks are taller. Sake rice has more starch in it than regular table rice. Now, starch gets converted into sugar, and that gets converted into alcohol. So we like starch, that's good. However, sake rice also has less fat and protein in it than regular table rice. Now, that fat and protein makes table rice taste better. However, when you make sake with high protein rice, it tends to be cloying and you have rougher flavors. So we like less fat and protein and higher starch, and that's what sake rice gives us over regular table rice. Furthermore, in proper sake rice, the starches that we want so badly are actually physically concentrated in the center of the grain. And around that, on the outside, we've got the fat and protein. What's really great about this is, remember, we want the starch in the center, but not the fat and protein on the outside. So all we have to do is grind away more and more of the outside of the grain, and you take away more and more of the fat and protein on the outside and leave only the starch behind. Another difference between sake rice and table rice is price. Sake rice is significantly more expensive than regular table rice. In fact, sake rice can be 2 to 3 times more expensive than regular table rice. However, using proper sake rice is going to give you a much more elegant, much more enjoyable product almost all the time. So the first thing that's going to make one sake better and more expensive than another is the quality of the rice that you begin with. The second thing that's going to make one sake better and more expensive than another is how much you milled that rice before you began to brew. A moment ago, we spoke about how proper sake rice has starches in the center and fat and protein around that. And we don't want the fat and protein, we only want the starch. So you grind away, you mill away, you polish away more and more of the outside of the grain, taking away the fat and protein and leave only the starch behind. This will lead to a much cleaner, more elegant, more refined sake in the end. However, you're taking raw materials that are already 2 to 3 times more expensive than regular stuff, and you're grinding away the outer 30, 40, 50, 60, sometimes 65% of the raw materials before you even begin to brew. This is obviously going to drive your price through the roof, but it's definitely going to be worth it. Taking proper sake rice and milling it down to a high degree will give you a much more refined, much more elegant, and often a much more aromatic product. So the first thing that's going to make one sake better and more expensive than another is the quality of the rice that you begin with, as we pointed out. The second thing that's going to make one sake better and more expensive than another is how much you've milled that rice before you begin to brew. The third thing that's going to make one sake better and more expensive than another is craftsmanship. The tender loving care, the stress, the angst, the effort that went into the brewing process. In order to explain that, consider that almost all sake on the market is made using very automated process. You put in the rice here, the water there, the yeast in there, the koji mold there, bada boom, bada bang, bada bing, and sake comes out the other end in about a month to 6 weeks. And a lot of this sake is perfectly enjoyable. However, in order to make the best grades of sake that you can, almost every single step of the process needs to be done by hand. And in so doing, every single step of the process will add a little bit more quality that cascades, giving you a significantly more enjoyable product at the end. As you can imagine, to do things the handcrafted way takes a lot more effort, a lot more manpower, and will cost you a lot more money as well. So that's going to drive up both price and quality at the same time. So those are the 3 things that make one sake better and more expensive than another. The quality of the rice that you begin with, how much you've milled that rice before you begin to brew, and the craftsmanship that went into the brewing process. In the next video, we talk about 3 rules that you need to enjoy sake tonight. So be sure to join us for that.